Hi everyone, I'm Mandy from Emptiness Designs, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a nice quick and easy men's card. So it would be suitable for Father's Day, male relative's birthday, ultimately any male card. So some of the things we're going to be using are scissors, glue, VersaFine Clair in Nocturne, so the black. Going to be using Mr. Toad. That's the stamp set that we're going to be using. Some foam pads, a selection of Spectrum Noir pens, and what I've done is I've just written down which ones I'm actually using. So I've got AB 1, 2 and 3, I've got AG 1, 3 and 5, and I have IG 2, 6 and 9. Some card to stamp on, black and white card for matte and layer and background, and a 6x6 card blank. So let me just move those out of the way for now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my stamp, ink it up, and stamp him out. This is a really large stamp. You know, if I put my hand in for reference, as you can see, it's quite a big size, which is ideal for, you know, a focal point on a card itself. And you can take it up to a really big card size, and you won't, you know, that image is not getting lost on a big card size. All right. So I've got my stamping mat underneath, so I get a nice good impression. Just line it up where I want it, give it a nice press, making sure I get all the bits. Okay, hopefully that's enough. Oh, I missed a little bit on his moustache, but we can rectify that by just taking a black pen and going over the bits that have been missed. Another thing that I do if I miss a bit of the stamp, I take a little scrap of card and I just use the ink that I would have stamped the image with, and I just fill in a gap with a bit of card. Okay, but that is him all stamped and ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is, normally I would let this dry a little bit. The VersaFine Clair, I've only used it a few times, but it's a really wet ink, which is great for like silhouette stamps. But it does mean that it stays wet for a while. So there's a couple of things I could do. I could emboss in clear, and that would seal the image off. But because I'm going to be colouring them in, I'm just going to give them a quick blast with the heat gun. So excuse the noise. Just to try and dry the ink some so that it doesn't run when I'm using the alcohol inks. I don't think that the VersaFine Clair is the best ink to use with alcohol inks. But we're going to go with that anyway. Okay, so let me just give him a little blast with the heat gun. Okay, hopefully that is enough to stop the ink from running everywhere. So I'm just going to give that a bit of a fan to cool them down, because I'm going to take the pens right to the card and I don't want it to be overly hot. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the AG1, which is the lightest green, and I'm going to just go over an entire area. So I'm not shading or anything at this point, I am just colouring an entire area in one go. Now I won't be colouring the whole image in because he's quite a big size and I have already got one coloured in, but I just wanted to show you how I colour in. So I'm now taking the AG5, which is the darkest of the greens that I'm using for this part, and this is where we're going to create the shading. So just adding in some of the lines that are already there for you to get an idea of what I'm doing. And then the mid shade of green, which is the AG3, we're going to go over where we've already been with the darkest shade and elements of the lightest shade as well. So I'm just going over that because now we're going to go back to the not to the darkest shade, we're going back to the lightest shade, AG1, and we're going to just blend all three colours together now so that we get a nice, not a flat image by any means, because the shading will mean that it stands out. So once the ink has dried, you'll see that a lot clearer. As I said, I'm not going to colour the whole image because I have already done that, but I will colour in a bit of the hat to show you how I do that as well. So again, I'm going to start with the lightest colour. This is IG2, and I'm going to go over the entirety of the brim and the top part of the hat, which I'm assuming is just called the top. If I'm honest, I don't know. So I'm not being too precise or too perfect because we are going to be covering that with other colours. Then once again, going to the darkest colour from the lightest to the darkest, and this would be IG9. I'm going to bring in the edges. And again, around the top part of the hat as well as the brim. A little bit across the very top flat part of the hat. Then we're going to the mid shade, in this case IG6, and we're going to go over the darker colour and then bring the mid shade in even further in the image. Okay, so this is what we've got so far. And then back to the lightest image again, the lightest colour again. We're just going to go over everything so that it blends. And it looks quite stark at the moment, but once the ink dries, it will have more of a blend to it. And I'll show you that in just a moment with the image that I've gone ahead and done. Okay, so once you've coloured him all in, including the little fabric trim on his hat, I recommend for this project that you then cut him out. So there's this to this. So this is what I was saying about how it's not as stark once the ink dries out some. It looks like a much more nicer blend. Okay, and there he is. He really doesn't take very long to cut out, but I figured you didn't want to watch me colour him in his entirety and then watch me cut him out completely as well, when the background is a little bit repetitive. So I didn't want to take up too much time doing that when I've got another step to do as well. So I'm just going to move the pens out of the way for now because they are just in my way. And I'm going to pop him over here as well, ready for use shortly. I'm going to grab in my 6x6 card and my cardstock for mats and layers. So let me just put a nicer crease in there. This is just a bone folder, just gives a nice crease on the card so that when you stand it, it sits nicely. I've got some black cardstock, and all I'm going to do is judge this just by eye, leaving a nice frame of white around, and I'm going to snip, leaving about a similar kind of frame size here and the same up here. And then I'm going to just grab my guillotine and chop this down. Find my snip. Just bring the card blank back in and make sure it's a nice even size the whole way round, which that looks pretty good to me. Then bringing in the white cards, we're going to do that again so that there is a black border around the edge this time. And again, trying to leave the same sort of size gap, we're just going to put a little snip here. And here. And then once again, just chop this down. I do love the sound of a guillotine. It's such a satisfying crunch. Okay. Now, you'll excuse my well-used papers, but it just protects my stamping mat from the excess ink that there's going to be. So I'm going to grab my Totally Awesome stamp from the Mr. Toad stamp set, and I'm going to grab back in the VersaFine Claire. Now we are going to create a wordy background that covers all of this. So I'm just going to get started. So what I'm going to do, because I want to stagger it like bricks, so I'm just going to start in the middle at the top, and we're going to work our way from there. So remembering to leave a little bit of a space where the words end, and try and keep it relatively straight if you can. And, you know, going off the edge gives a really nice, complete look. It doesn't look like you were trying to keep it neat and tidy. So I'm going to come back to some of the, like here, I would literally just put a tiny little bit in there. But right now I'm just going to move down and fill in the gaps at the end, because I want to get this built up quite quickly so that you aren't bored to tears watching me just create this background. I'm leaving slightly larger gaps than I would if I wasn't doing this quickly for your benefit, in between the rows. But like I said, I just want to make sure that this is done, and for you to see that it can be a bit time consuming, but the effect is really worth it. And if you do it quickly, it will still look nice. As I said, I know that I've got some gaps, but I'm going to go back and fill those at the end, because I just think it'd be easier to do it that way. I am also very aware that I'm not staying very straight, but speed is taking precedent over that. And almost finished. So like I said, there's a few little bits that I want to just go back in and add a little bit on. And then it's a bit confusing when you can see the words poking out from underneath. Once I've done this and I move the mat, all I'm going to do here is, because the bottom is a bit big, I am just going to fill that in. So just a tiny little bit, just so it's not empty at the bottom. There we go. Okay, so that's probably the fastest I've ever done that. So let me just move the sheets out from underneath, so it kind of makes a bit more sense. So that's a full background just using the Totally Awesome stamp. So I'm going to bring the layers back in, and making sure that I've got them on the right way, because there will be a right and a wrong way, and that is the wrong way, so I turn that. Trying not to touch the ink too much because it's probably still quite wet. So that will sit on there like so, and that will then sit on here like so. I think I've got that. Am I putting it tent ways? Yeah, we're going to make this a tent card. So if you don't know what that means, all it is whereas traditionally you would open a card like this, the tent card just means you open it like this, because when it stands, I'll do it sideways, but if you imagine my hand is the surface, it looks like a tent. That is literally where the name comes from. Okay, so all I'm going to do is grab my glue. Like I said, this was just a really quick demo today. I'm going to bring in a sheet because I don't want any of the wet ink from the sheet I was using transferring back onto this as I glue it. So I'm just using a Tonic Quick Grab tacky glue. I think it's one of my favourite glues, if I'm honest. It just works really well. You've got a few seconds wiggle room, and then it's stuck, which is exactly what you want. You don't want to be waiting ages and ages and ages for your glue to dry. I like to turn it over and give it a press from behind, and then it's all ready to add the glue for the next mat and layer. I do find that making men's cards can be such a challenge, especially if, like me, you don't really like the generic sort of football, rugby images, which is why I came up with Mr. Toad. Make sure I've got that the right way. Just pop it on, try and get it as even as possible, because you have got a few seconds, but that's all you have. Move those out the way, give that a press. Okay, so we are getting there. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to drag in the finished Mr. Toad and some of the foam pads. And let's just start. Oh, I want to chop that down a little bit. That's quite big for the hat there. Just pop some of these on. Now, where do I put the rest? Just there. Oops. Oh, just jumped right out of my hand. There's a corny joke in there about it being like a toad or something, I guess, but we're not going to go down that route. So just snip a little bit off of one so that we can put a bit in the hat, but it isn't then spilling over the edges. And I'm going to just take a little bit and pop it in the fingers so that there's extra support. And I am aware I've got a big gap in the middle. I will fix that in just a minute. So just making sure there's a bit of extra support behind the fingers. That's why I like the bigger foam pads, because you can just, they cover a large area quickly, but you can also cut them down to the size you need. So I'm going to do that again. So taking the bigger piece and filling that gap in the centre and chopping that down and filling in the other little fingers here. I think that's still a bit too big. We'll just give it that. We'll make that one fit. Okay. Take the backs off. So if you haven't used foam pads before, They are a piece of foam with double-sided, and with adhesive on either sides, and it just helps give you some height to a project. So if you wanted a lot of height, you could double up on the foam pads. I've done that before a few times. If you want something to really stand off the page. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is bring this over, and I'm going to just line this up so that he sits quite centrally. So trying to give myself the same kind of gap top and bottom, and then side and side. So just take a minute, don't rush this part. That looks fairly even. Just give him a press down so the foam pads stick, and that is the finished card. Like I said, today was just a nice quick make for one of the men in your life, and he's all done. If you wanted to do another step in the stamp set, there is a monocle. So that's here. Let me just pull that in. This is a monocle, and you can literally just stamp, cut that out, and just on a bit of 3D foam so he stands up. What I really like to do as well is what would be the glass section. I tend to use a VersaFine pen and just draw, just colour in the what would be the glass section, and then heat emboss that with clear embossing powder so it looks like glass. Other than that, you could decoupage him as well. I've done that with this incredible image before. I like the effect that gives too. But this particular demonstration is finished now, so I'm hoping that you've enjoyed it and that I've inspired you a little bit. If you have liked it, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. All my social media and website information is underneath this video, where you can purchase the Mr. Toad stamp set. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!